The doctor had just told me my wife had 3 weeks to live. 3 goddamn weeks. I watched through the gauze as Sophie's chest barely rose with each shallow breath, tubes snaking from her fragile body to a battalion of beeping machines. The smell of antiseptic burned my nostrils as I pressed my palm against the cold barrier separating us. That's when I heard it. Hushed voices just around the corner. She looks exactly like that Megan from Charlottesville. Same eyes, same chin. You think they're related? Has to be. Sisters? Maybe. My hand froze against the glass. Sisters? Sophie didn't have a sister. She told me 1,000 times she was alone in the world after her parents died in that car crash. I'd held her through nightmares about it for 12 years of marriage. But as those nurses' whispers floated down the sterile hallway of St. Joseph's Hospital, everything I thought I knew about my wife began to unravel. I'm Jake Morgan, a 38-year-old custom furniture maker from Savannah, with sawdust permanently embedded in my fingerprints, and a wife dying from something called systemic hematochronic anemia, some rare blood disease that was eating her from the inside out, destroying her bone marrow, shutting down her body system by system. The only hope was a stem cell transplant from a close relative, a relative she supposedly didn't have. We met 15 years ago at a friend's barbecue. Sophie was wearing a yellow sundress, laughing as she balanced a paper plate on her knee. I remember thinking she looked like summer itself, warm, bright, alive. Her dark hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and when she smiled at me, I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I walked over, nearly tripping over a cooler, and managed to stammer out an introduction. "You've got sawdust in your hair," she said, reaching up to brush it away. Her fingers were cool against my scalp. "Occupational hazard," I replied. "I make furniture." "Like what?" "Tables, chairs, bookshelves, custom stuff. I'm working on a rocking chair right now that's giving me hell." She smiled again. "I've always wanted a rocking chair for my porch." 3 months later, I delivered that chair to her apartment. 6 months after that, she moved into my house. A year later, we were married in a small ceremony on Tybee Island, with just a handful of friends present. No family on her side. Her parents were dead. She was an only child, and she'd lost touch with distant relatives. I never questioned it. Why would I? Now, standing in that antiseptic-soaked hospital corridor, my world tilted on its axis. My fingers found the chain around my neck where I kept my wedding ring while working in my shop. I twisted it hard enough to leave marks on my skin. I followed those nurses, my heart pounding in my throat. One was older, with steel gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. The other was younger, maybe 30, with a blonde ponytail. "Excuse me," I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. "I overheard you talking about my wife, Sophie Morgan. You mentioned someone named Megan from Charlottesville?" They exchanged that look medical professionals have perfected. Part pity, part professional distance. "Sir, we can't discuss other patients," the older one said. "Please," I begged, not caring how desperate I sounded. "My wife is dying. If there's a relative out there who could be a donor match." The younger nurse's expression softened slightly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morgan. I can't tell you anything specific. But if I were looking for someone from Charlottesville with the last name Blake, I might start with social media." Blake. Not Morgan, not even Sophie's maiden name, which was Taylor, according to our marriage license. The older nurse shot her colleague a warning look and ushered her away, leaving me standing there, clutching a new name like it was a life raft in open water. I returned to Sophie's room. Her oncologist, Dr. Patel, was checking her vitals. "How is she?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No change," he said, his voice gentle. "Mr. Morgan, I know we've discussed this before, but I have to ask again. Are you absolutely certain there are no biological relatives we could test? The transplant is her best chance." I stared at my wife's pale face, the dark circles under her eyes like bruises against her skin. "I thought I was certain," I said quietly. "Now I'm not so sure." That night, I didn't go home. I couldn't bear to be in our house, our life, surrounded by the furniture I'd built for us, the photos of our vacations, the garden she'd planted that was just starting to bloom with spring flowers. Instead, I sat in the hospital parking lot in my truck, my laptop balanced on the steering wheel, searching for Megan Blake from Charlottesville. It didn't take long. There she was on Facebook. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same heart-shaped face, the same slightly crooked smile. But where Sophie's hair was dark, Megan's was a light brown with blonde highlights. Her profile was mostly private, but I could see she worked at an auto repair shop called Riley's. There were a few public photos, Megan in overalls smeared with grease, Megan with friends at what looked like a bar, Megan with a large German shepherd. I dug deeper. County records, newspaper archives, anything I could find. And there it was, in a local Charlottesville newspaper from 15 years ago. An obituary for Michael and Elizabeth Blake, killed in a car accident on Route 29, survived by their daughters, Sophia and Megan. Sophia, not Sophie. My wife had changed her name. She'd erased her sister from her life. She'd lied to me for our entire relationship. I barely slept that night, dozing fitfully in the reclined driver's seat of my truck. By morning, my back was screaming, and my mind was made up. I called my assistant at the workshop, told him I'd be gone for a few days, and asked him to handle the 2 commissions we had in progress. "Everything okay, boss?" he asked. "No," I answered honestly, "but I'm hoping it will be." I showered in the hospital locker room, changed into clean clothes from my overnight bag, and went to see Sophie before I left. She was awake, which was rare these days. The disease and the treatments had left her exhausted most of the time. "Hey, beautiful," I said, taking her hand. It felt so small, so fragile in mine. "Hey, yourself," she whispered, her voice raspy. "You look terrible." I managed to smile. "Look who's talking." Fair point. Her attempt at laughter turned into a cough. When it subsided, she squeezed my hand weakly. "Jake, I need you to do something for me." "Anything. Let me go." Her eyes, still that vivid blue I'd fallen in love with, were steady on mine. "The treatment isn't working. We both know it." I felt like I'd been punched. "No, don't say that." "It's okay," she said. "I've made my peace with it." I leaned forward, pressing my forehead against hers. "Well, I haven't, and I'm not going to." She didn't have the strength to argue. After a while, she fell back asleep, her breathing shallow and labored. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I'll be back soon, and I'm bringing help." The drive to Charlottesville took just over 6 hours. Spring was in full bloom, the roadside splashed with wildflowers, the trees dressed in fresh green. It should have been beautiful. All I saw was a blur through my windshield. Halfway there, my phone rang. It was Dr. Patel. My heart jumped into my throat. "Mr. Morgan, I'm calling about your wife." "What happened? Is she's had a seizure. We've stabilized her, but her condition has deteriorated. The disease is progressing faster than we anticipated." I pulled over, my hands shaking too badly to drive. "How long?" There was a pause. "Days, not weeks, I'm sorry." Days, not even the 3 weeks we'd been promised. I thanked him mechanically and hung up, then sat on the shoulder of the highway, watching cars speed past, each driver living in a world where their wife wasn't dying by the hour. I called Sophie's hospital room. A nurse answered and put her on. Her voice was so weak I could barely hear her. "Jake, where are you?" "On my way to find your sister," I said, not bothering to hide it anymore. Silence, then, "How did you know?" "It doesn't matter. Why didn't you tell me, Sophie? All these years, why did you lie?" "I was ashamed," she whispered, "of what I did to her. I thought if you knew..." "If I knew what? That you had a sister? That would have changed how I felt about you." "That I stole from her by bar," Sophie said, the words coming out in a rush. "After our parents died, there was money, insurance, savings. I took it all, told her she couldn't handle it. Then I left, changed my name, started over. She needed me, and I abandoned her." I closed my eyes, trying to process this new information. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I'm dying, Jake, and I don't want to die with this secret between us." Her voice broke. "Find her. Tell her I'm sorry. Even if she can't help me, I need her to know that." I promised I wouldn't, got back on the road, driving faster now, the urgency of Sophie's condition propelling me forward. The revelation of her theft added a new layer to the betrayal, but it didn't change my mission. I had to find Megan. Had to try. Riley's auto shop was on the outskirts of town, a large corrugated metal building with a gravel parking lot and a neon sign that buzzed in the afternoon sun. I parked and sat for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. What was I going to say? "Hi, I'm your brother-in-law and your sister is dying?" The garage doors were open, revealing 2 car lifts, one empty, one holding an old Chevy. Country music played from a radio somewhere inside. I walked in, the smell of oil and rubber hitting me like a wall. "Help you?" a voice called from beneath the Chevy. "I'm looking for Megan Blake," I said. A pair of legs and blue coveralls slid out from under the car, followed by the rest of a woman. She sat up, wiping her hands on a rag. It was her, the woman from the photos, Sophie's sister. The resemblance was even more striking in person. "That's me," she said, standing up. She was tall, maybe an inch or two shorter than my 6 feet, with the same slender build as Sophie. "Car trouble?" "No," I said, my voice catching. I cleared my throat. "My name is Jake Morgan. I'm Sophie's husband." The change was immediate. Her face hardened, her body tensed, and her eyes, so like my wife's, turned cold. "Get out. Please just hear me out." I said, "Get out." She threw the rag down and turned away, heading toward a door marked office. I followed her. "Megan, please, Sophie is dying." She stopped but didn't turn around. "That's not my problem. She needs a stem cell transplant. From family, you're her only hope." Now she did turn, her face a mask of fury and pain. "Family? Is that what she told you we are? That's rich, coming from her." "She didn't tell me anything about you," I admitted. "I only found out you existed yesterday." That seemed to catch her off guard. "What?" I told her about overhearing the nurses, about my late-night research. As I spoke, we stood in the middle of the garage, the country music still playing incongruously in the background. "So she just erased me," Megan said when I finished. "Typical Sophie, always rewriting history to suit herself." "What happened between you two?" I asked. She laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "You really don't know anything, do you? God, she must be some actress." "Tell me," I said, "please." Megan stared at me for a long moment, then nodded toward the office. "Not here." The office was small and cluttered, with a desk overflowing with paperwork and walls covered in car calendars and parts catalogs. She closed the door behind us and leaned against the desk, arms crossed over her chest. "Our parents died when we were 23, she began. Drunk driver hit them head on. Sophie and I handled it differently. I fell apart. Started drinking, quit college, made a mess of my life. Sophie became super daughter. Organized the funeral, dealt with the will, took care of everything while I was too wasted to function." She paused, looking past me at something only she could see. "There was an inheritance. Not huge, but enough to make a difference. About $200,000 from insurance and their savings. It should have been split between us. But Sophie decided I was too irresponsible to handle my share. She said she'd give it to me when I got my act together, whatever that meant." "Did you?" I asked quietly. "Eventually, got sober, found work, built a life. But by then, Sophie was gone. Changed her number, moved away. When I finally tracked her down and asked for my share of the money, she said it was gone. Spent on her nursing degree and a down payment on a house. Our house, the one I'd thought we'd saved for together, dollar by dollar. Did you know she wasn't even a nurse until after our parents died?" Megan continued. "She was studying the art history, for God's sake. Then suddenly she's Florence Nightingale? It was all part of her new identity, the responsible one, the caring one." My head was spinning. The Sophie I knew was passionate about nursing, about helping children. She'd never mentioned art history or a previous career path. "The last time I saw her was 10 years ago, Megan said. I drove to Savannah, showed up at the hospital where she worked. She took one look at me and said, 'You shouldn't be here,' like I was some disease she might catch. That was it. I left, and I never tried again." The pain in her voice was raw, even after all this time. I believed her, but I also knew my wife, knew her gentleness with her young patients, her middle-of-the-night anxiety about them, her genuine compassion. Both versions of Sophie seemed true, and I couldn't reconcile them. "I'm sorry," I said inadequately. "For what it's worth, I had no idea about any of this." "Yeah, well, Sophie always was good at keeping secrets." Megan pushed away from the desk and opened the office door. "You've got your story now. I'm sorry she's sick, but I can't help you." "Wait," I pulled out my phone and found a recent photo of Sophie in the hospital. "Just look at her, please." Reluctantly, Megan took the phone. I watched as her expression changed, the anger giving way to shock, then dismay. "Jesus," she whispered. "She looks so—" "She's dying," I said again. "Days, maybe less, without the transplant. Whatever she did to you, and I'm not excusing it, do you really want her last days to be like this? Do you want to live with that?" Megan handed back the phone, her hand trembling slightly. "I need to think about it. We don't have much time." "I said I need to think," she snapped. Then more quietly, "Where are you staying?" I don't know, I just drove straight here. She sighed. There's a Holiday Inn Express on University Avenue. Get a room, I'll call you tomorrow. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was better than an outright no. I wrote down my number for her and left, the sound of a wrench being thrown against a wall following me out to the parking lot. Back in my truck, I sat with my head against the steering wheel, exhaustion washing over me. My phone buzzed with a text from our friend Allison, who was at the hospital with Sophie. She's asking for you. Where are you? I texted back, tell her I'm with Megan. I'll be back tomorrow. The response came quickly. She's crying. She wants to talk to you. I called the hospital room. This time it was Allison who answered. Jake, thank God. She's really upset. Put her on, what I said. There was rustling, then Sophie's voice, weaker than before. Jake, I'm here. I found her, Soph. Is she coming? The hope in her voice was painful to hear. I don't know yet. She's thinking about it. A pause. She hates me, doesn't she? She's hurt, I said carefully, but I don't think she hates you. Tell her, Sophie's voice faded, then came back. Tell her the money's in a trust, all of it, the original amount plus interest. I never spent it. I couldn't. It was never mine to spend. This blindsided me. What are you talking about? I opened an account in her name, been adding to it for years. The paperwork was in the safe at home. The combination is our anniversary. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you tell her? Pride, she whispered. Stupid, stupid pride. I was too ashamed to admit what I'd done, then too proud to admit I was wrong. And then too much time had passed, and it seemed impossible to fix. I closed my eyes, trying to process yet another revelation. I'll tell her. Get some rest, okay? I'll be back as soon as I can. Jake, I love you, no matter what happens. I've always loved you. That was never a lie. I love you too, I said, and realized, despite everything, it was still true. The hotel room was generic and depressing. Beige walls, floral bedspread, the faint smell of industrial cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed and called Dr. Patel for another update on Sophie. She's stable for now, he said. We've increased her pain medication. Mr. Morgan, if you found a potential donor, we need to move immediately. I'm working on it, I told him. How soon would you need to do the testing? As soon as she agrees, we can arrange for preliminary testing at a facility in Charlottesville. The results can be sent to us electronically. If she's a match, we'd need her in Savannah as soon as possible for the donation procedure. I thanked him and hung up, then lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone rang again. Megan. Is it true? She demanded without preamble. About the trust fund? I sat up. How did you know about that? Sophie called me, right after you left. Could barely understand her, she was so drugged up. But she told me about the money. Is it true, or is she just trying to get me to help her? I just found out about it myself, I admitted. But yes, I believe it's true. She said the paperwork is in our safe at home. Megan was quiet for a moment. She also said she has days, not weeks. Is that true too? Yes. Another silence. Then, I'll do it. The testing, I mean. There's a university hospital here that can do it, right? Relief flooded through me. Yes, I'll make the arrangements right now. Don't thank me yet, she said, her voice tight. I'm not doing this for her. I'm doing it because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't try. I understand. No, you don't, she said bluntly. You have no idea what it's like to be betrayed by the one person who was supposed to always have your back, to be abandoned when you needed them most. You're right, I acknowledged. I don't know what that's like, but I'm starting to understand what it's like to discover the person you love most in the world isn't who you thought they were. A grudging softness entered her voice. Yeah, I guess you are. We made arrangements to meet at the university hospital the next morning. I called Dr. Patel back with the news, and he immediately began coordinating with the medical team in Charlottesville. Then I called Sophie's hospital room again, but the nurse said she was sleeping. Let her rest, I told the nurse. But when she wakes up, tell her Megan said yes. I slept fitfully that night, dreams of Sophie and Megan blending together, their faces morphing from one to the other. In the dream, they were both drowning, and I could only save one. I woke up gasping, soaked in sweat. The testing process was quicker than I expected. Megan arrived at the hospital in the same grease-stained coveralls she'd worn the day before, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Morning, she said gruffly. Morning. Thank you for doing this. She shrugged. Like I said, don't thank me yet. We were taken to a small examination room where a doctor explained the process. They would take blood samples to determine if Megan was a compatible donor. The initial results would be available in a few hours with more detailed matching to follow. The fact that you're siblings gives us a good starting point, the doctor said. Siblings have about a 25% chance of being a perfect match, but even a partial match can work. Megan rolled up her sleeve. Let's get on with it then. While we waited for the results, we sat in the hospital cafeteria picking at tasteless sandwiches neither of us wanted. Tell me about her, Megan said suddenly. You're Sophie. What's she like? I thought about it. She's dedicated to her patients, especially. She works in pediatric oncology, cancer, kids. She comes home some days just wrecked by what they're going through, but she never wants to quit. Says someone has to be there for them. Megan nodded slowly. She always did have a savior complex. Maybe, I conceded, but it's genuine. The care she gives those kids, it's real. What else? She's funny, in a quiet way. Makes these little observations that crack me up. She loves old movies, anything black and white. Hates cooking, but does it anyway because I work late sometimes. She can't sing to save her life, but does it in the shower every morning. I smiled at the memory. She's stubborn as hell. Once she decides something, that's it. That part I remember, Megan said with a hint of a smile. We used to call her Bulldog Blake when we were kids. Once she got her teeth into something, she wouldn't let go. Sounds about right. We fell into a surprisingly comfortable conversation, swapping stories about Sophie. Despite the years of separation, despite the betrayal between them, there was an undeniable bond there. The shared history of siblings who had once known each other better than anyone else in the world. 3 hours later, the doctor called us back to his office. We have the preliminary results, he said, looking at a chart. Ms. Blake, you are a potential match for your sister. We'll need more detailed testing to confirm, but this is very promising. Megan's face remained impassive. How soon can you do the additional tests? We can do them today. The results will take about 24 hours. And if I'm a match, what happens then? The doctor explained the donation process, a series of injections to stimulate stem cell production, followed by a procedure called apheresis, where blood is drawn, the stem cells are filtered out, and the remaining blood is returned to the donor. It's not surgery, he assured her, but it does take several hours, and you might experience some side effects from the injections. Bone pain, fatigue, headaches. Megan nodded. When can we start? If the detailed matching confirms compatibility, we can begin the injections tomorrow. The actual donation would be in about 5 days. 5 days. I thought about Dr. Patel's warning. Days, not weeks. Would Sophie hold on that long? As if reading my thoughts, Megan turned to me. Will she make it? 5 more days? I don't know, I answered honestly, but she's fighting. Megan's jaw set in a determined line. Then let's do this. The additional testing was completed that afternoon. We checked into adjoining rooms at the Holiday Inn, Megan refusing to stay with me at first, then reluctantly agreeing when I pointed out it would be easier to coordinate if we were in the same place. That night, I called Sophie again. This time, she was awake enough to talk. Megan's being tested, I told her. The preliminary results look good. Thank God, she breathed. Jake, I need to tell you something else. What is it? The house, our house. I paid for it with money from my parents' life insurance. Not Megan's share, mine. I never lied about that. But I did lie about having the money in the first place. I'm sorry. It's okay, I said, though it wasn't, not really. Nothing about this situation was okay. We'll figure it all out when you're better. If I get better, she corrected gently. When? I insisted. Megan's a match. The transplant is going to work. Always the optimist, she said, with a trace of her old teasing tone. That's why I fell in love with you, you know. You always see the best possible outcome. Even when it's impossible. Not impossible. Not this time. We talked for a few more minutes before she got too tired to continue. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The weight of the past 2 days, the discoveries, the revelations, the desperate race against time, crashed down on me all at once. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the wetness on my face. A knock at the door startled me. I wiped my eyes quickly and opened it to find Megan standing there, a bottle of whiskey in one hand and 2 plastic cups in the other. Thought you might need this, she said. I know I do. I stepped back to let her in. She poured 2 generous measures and handed me one. To family, she said with a bitter twist to her mouth. Complicated as hell. We drank in silence for a moment. I talked to Sophie, I said finally. She sounds a little stronger today. Megan nodded. Good. That's good. She told me about the house, how she paid for it with her share of the insurance money, not yours. Does that make it better? That she only lied about having money, not about stealing mine? I shook my head. No, it doesn't make any of it better. But I'm trying to understand. She's not just one thing, you know? She's not just the person who hurt you. She's also the person who sits with dying children so their parents can take a break, who rescued our neighbor's cat from a storm drain last year, who sends care packages to her patients who move away. People are complicated, Megan agreed. Sophie more than most. She took another drink. You know what the worst part was? Not the money. It was that she just disappeared. One day my sister was there. The next, she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye. Just gone. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. She should never have done that to you. No, she shouldn't have. Megan stared into her cup. But I wasn't exactly Sister of the Year material back then either. Drunk most of the time, crying the rest. I was a mess. You were grieving. So was she, but she held it together. Always the strong one, Sophie. Megan's voice turned reflective. You know, when we were kids, she was always protecting me. From bullies, from bad decisions, from myself. Even when I resented it, there was something comforting about knowing she was there, watching out for me. I could see it, Sophie as a fierce little girl standing up for her sister. The same determination I'd seen in her as an adult, fighting for her patients, for what she believed in. And then one day she wasn't, Megan continued. I lost my parents and my sister all at once. Had to figure out how to be an adult on my own. But you did, I pointed out. You got sober, found work, built a life. She gave a short laugh. Yeah, turns out I'm stronger than anyone thought, including me. The next day, the detailed matching results came back. Megan was a viable donor. Now, not a perfect match, but close enough. The medical team immediately started her on injections to boost her stem cell production. The side effects hit her hard, bone pain so severe she could barely walk, splitting headaches, nausea, but she refused to complain. Sophie's going through worse, she said when I asked if she was okay. This is nothing. I called Dr. Patel with the news. We're proceeding with the donor protocol here, I told him. How's Sophie holding up? She's fighting, he said, but her condition is deteriorating. We've moved her to the ICU. The infection risk is very high now. Her immune system is essentially non-existent. Will she make it until the transplant? A pause. We're doing everything we can, Mr. Morgan. Not a yes. I thanked him and hung up, a cold dread settling in my stomach. Megan was watching me from her bed, where she lay with a heating pad against her back to ease the bone pain. Bad news? She's in the ICU. The infection risk is high. Megan's face tightened. Can we speed this up? The donation? I'll ask. The doctors reluctantly agreed to accelerate the process. Instead of waiting 5 days, they would harvest Megan's stem cells after 3 days of injections. It wasn't ideal, the cell count might be lower, but under the circumstances, they understood the urgency. Those 3 days were the longest of my life. Megan grew weaker as the injections took their toll, but she refused to slow down or complain. I received regular updates from Dr. Patel and Allison. Sophie was holding on, but just barely. Her organs were beginning to fail. The infection they'd been fighting had spread to her lungs. On the morning of the donation, Megan could barely get out of bed. The nurse who came to take her to the hospital offered a wheelchair, which she refused. I'll walk, she insisted, though every step was clearly agony. You don't have to prove anything, I told her as we made our way to the car. Not trying to prove anything, she said through gritted teeth. Just want to do this right. The donation process took 6 hours. Megan lay in a reclining chair while a machine drew her blood, filtered out the stem cells, and returned the rest to her body. By the end, she was pale and exhausted, but the medical team was satisfied with the harvest. We've got a good collection, the doctor told us. It's being processed now and will be flown to Savannah immediately. How soon until she gets it? Megan asked weakly from the chair. Tonight. The transplant itself is simple, like a blood transfusion. The difficult part is whether her body will accept the new cells. It will, Megan said with unexpected fierceness. Tell her those cells have the Blake family stubbornness built in. They're not going anywhere once they get where they're supposed to be. The doctor smiled. I'll be sure to note that in the medical file. We flew back to Savannah that evening on a medical transport plane, the precious cargo of stem cells carefully stored in a specialized container. Megan was still weak from the donation process, but she refused to stay behind. I've come this far, she said. Might as well see it through. When we arrived at St. Joseph's Hospital, Dr. Patel met us at the entrance. His expression was grave. She's very weak, he warned us. The infection in her lungs has worsened. We've intubated her to help her breathe. My heart sank. Will the transplant still work? We'll proceed as planned. The stem cells may help her fight to the infection as they engraft and begin producing white blood cells. But I must be honest, her condition is critical. Megan's hand found mine and squeezed. I looked at her in surprise. It was the first gesture of comfort she'd offered since we met. She's not done yet, Megan said with quiet conviction. Blake women don't give up that easily. We were allowed to see Sophie briefly before the transplant. She was barely recognizable, swollen from medications, a tube down her throat, machines breathing for her. Megan stopped in the doorway, her face draining of what little color it had left. Jesus, she whispered. She looks. I know. I moved to Sophie's side and took her hand. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with effort. I could see the moment she registered Megan standing behind me, a faint widening of her eyes, a slight increase in the beeping of the heart monitor. She's here, Soph, I said, stroking her hair back from her forehead. Megan's here. She's your donor. The transplant is happening tonight. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She tried to move her hand toward Megan, but she was too weak. Megan hesitated, then came forward and took her sister's other hand. Hey, Soph, she said softly. Long time no see. The transplant itself was anticlimactic, just another bag added to the many already flowing into Sophie's veins. But as I watched the clear liquid drip down the tube, I felt a surge of hope. Those cells were Sophie's best chance. Maybe her only chance. Dr. Patel explained what would happen next. The new stem cells would travel through Sophie's bloodstream to her bone marrow, where they would hopefully begin producing new healthy blood cells. It would take time, weeks, maybe longer, to know if the transplant was successful. The first sign will be an increase in her white blood cell count, he said. That could begin in as little as 7 to 10 days if all goes well. And the infection? I asked. We're treating it aggressively with the antibiotics. If the new stem cells engraft quickly, they'll help her fight it off, but these next few days are critical. Megan and I took up a vigil in the ICU waiting room. She was still weak from the donation, and I insisted she take the small couch while I sat in a chair. We slept in shifts, one of us always awake in case there was news. On the third day after the transplant, Sophie took a turn for the worse. Her oxygen levels dropped, and her kidneys began to fail. The medical team worked frantically to stabilize her, but Dr. Patel's face when he came to update us told me everything I needed to know. We're doing everything we can, he said, but you should prepare yourselves. Megan, who had been dozing on the couch, sat up. No, it's too soon. The stem cells haven't had time to work yet. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Blake, but your sister's body has been through a tremendous ordeal. The infection, the conditioning treatments for the transplant, the disease itself, it's all taken a toll. Can I see her? Megan asked. Yes, but only for a few minutes. We're limiting exposure to reduce infection risk. Megan nodded and stood up, swaying slightly from exhaustion. I moved to help her, but she waved me away. I'm fine, you should come too. Sophie looked even worse than before. Her skin had a gray tinge, and the monitors surrounding her bed displayed numbers that even I knew were dangerously low. Megan approached the bed and leaned down close to Sophie's ear. Listen to me, Sophie Blake, she said, her voice low and intense. You don't get to do this. You don't get to bring me all the way here just to check out. My stem cells are in there now, and they're just as stubborn as I am. So you fight. You hear me? Fight. Sophie gave no sign she heard, but the heart monitor beeped a little faster, as if in response. Megan straightened up, wiping at her eyes. Stupid allergies, she muttered, though we both knew the ICU was the most allergen-free environment possible. The next 48 hours were the darkest of my life. Sophie hovered between life and death, her body battling against overwhelming odds. Megan and I barely left the hospital, taking turns at Sophie's bedside, talking to her, playing her favorite music, doing anything we could think of to keep her connected to this world. On the morning of the 5th day post-transplant, Dr. Patel found us in the cafeteria, picking at tasteless eggs and cold toast. There's been a change, he said, and for the first time I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Her white blood cell count has increased slightly. It's very preliminary, but it suggests the new stem cells may be engrafting. Megan's fork clattered to her plate. What does that mean? Is she going to be okay? It's too soon to say for certain, Dr. Patel cautioned, but it's a positive sign. The next 24-48 hours will tell us more. Over the next few days, Sophie's condition began to stabilize. Her white blood cell count continued to rise slowly but steadily. The infection in her lungs began to respond to the antibiotics. Her kidney function improved. She was still critical, still on the ventilator, but moving in the right direction. A week after the transplant, they removed the breathing tube. Sophie took her first unassisted breaths in days, weak but sustainable. When she opened her eyes and recognized me, I felt a weight lift from my chest for the first time since this nightmare began. "Hey," she whispered hoarsely. "Hey yourself," I said, unable to stop the tears that sprang to my eyes. "Welcome back." Her gaze moved past me to Megan, who stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed. "You stayed," Sophie said, her voice barely audible. "Someone had to make sure those stubborn cells of mine took hold," Megan replied with forced lightness. Sophie tried to smile, but it was more of a grimace. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Megan said, echoing the phrase she'd used with me so many times. "You've still got a long way to go." Over the next few weeks, Sophie's recovery was slow but steady. The new stem cells continued to produce healthy blood cells. The infection cleared. She was moved out of the ICU to a regular room, then to a step-down unit. Physical therapy began to help her regain strength after so much time bedridden. Megan stayed in Savannah, first at a hotel, then in our guest room when it became clear Sophie's recovery would be measured in months, not weeks. She found temporary work at a local garage and established a routine. Work during the day, hospital visits in the evening. The relationship between the sisters was fragile at first, weighed down by years of hurt and betrayal. But as Sophie grew stronger, they began to talk, really talk about what had happened. I gave them privacy for these conversations, but Sophie told me about them later. "She had every right to hate me," Sophie said one evening as we sat on the hospital terrace, her first time outside in nearly 2 months. "I wouldn't have blamed her if she'd never forgiven me." "But she did," I pointed out. "Not completely, not yet, but we're getting there." Sophie looked out at the sunset, her face thoughtful. "She told me something I never knew. After our parents died, she tried to call me dozens of times during those first few months. But I was so angry, so certain she'd squander her share of the money, that I ignored her calls. By the time I realized what I was throwing away, it was too late. I'd lost my sister." "But you found her again," I said, "or rather she found you." Sophie smiled slightly. "With your help. You know, when I heard your voice on the phone that day telling me you were with Megan, I thought I was hallucinating. It seemed impossible that after all this time, all my lies, you would somehow find the one person I'd tried so hard to erase. I'm glad I did," I said honestly. "Not just because she saved your life, but because she's part of you, a part I never knew was missing." 3 months after the transplant, Sophie was discharged from the hospital. Her recovery was far from complete. She would need regular checkups, medications, and precautions against infection for months to come, but she was coming home. Megan and I decorated the house with welcome home signs and balloons, despite Sophie's protest that it wasn't necessary. "Just humor us," Megan told her as we helped her from the car. "We nearly lost you. We get to celebrate that we didn't." That night, after Sophie had gone to bed, exhausted from the excitement of coming home, Megan and I sat on the porch. The summer air was heavy with humidity, fireflies blinking in the darkness of the yard. "What happens now?" I asked. Megan took a sip of her beer. "I've been thinking about that. My lease is up in Charlottesville next month. I could stay, find a permanent job here, be close to Sophie during her recovery." "We'd like that," I said immediately. "You know you're welcome here as long as you want." "I appreciate that, but I think I need my own place. Can't be the third wheel in your marriage forever." She smiled to soften the words. "But maybe nearby. Sophie mentioned there's a garage for sale on the south side of town." "Riley's cousin Hank's place?" "Yeah, it's been on the market for a while. Good location." Megan nodded thoughtfully. "Might be worth looking into. With the trust fund money Sophie's been holding for me, I could probably make a down payment." "You should. It would be good to have you here." I meant it. Despite the circumstances of our meeting, I'd grown to genuinely like Megan, her directness, her resilience, her dry humor so similar to Sophie's. Thanks. She was quiet for a moment. You know, I keep thinking about how random this all was. If those nurses hadn't been gossiping that day, if you hadn't overheard them. I try not to think about that, I admitted. It's too terrifying. Life's strange, isn't it? How the biggest moments can hinge on the smallest coincidences. I looked through the window to where Sophie slept peacefully in our bed. Home at last. I'm just grateful it worked out the way it did. A week later, Sophie was strong enough to join us for dinner at the kitchen table, her first real meal outside of the bedroom since coming home. Megan cooked, surprisingly well for someone who claimed to subsist mainly on takeout, and I opened a bottle of sparkling cider since Sophie still couldn't have alcohol. To new beginnings, I proposed, raising my glass. And second chances, Sophie added softly, looking at her sister. Megan held up her glass. To family, complicated as it is. We drank to that, the three of us bound together by blood, by choice, by the strange twists of fate that had nearly torn us apart and then brought us back together. Nothing was perfect. Sophie's recovery would be unknown and uncertain. The trust between us all still fragile in places. But we were here together alive. And for now, that was enough.